The federal government just launched a new savings account for kids, but that's not the most important thing I want to tell you today. Most parents are asking, should I open a Trump account? I actually think that's the wrong question. Today, there are 7 different ways to save for your child's future. Choosing the wrong one could quietly cost your family thousands of dollars in taxes, financial aid, or lost flexibility. So, in this video, I'm going to compare all 7 side by side. I'm going to show you exactly how I think through this decision for my own family. But before we compare any accounts, there are 2 concepts almost no one explains that completely change how you should evaluate every single one. Without these 2 concepts, none of these comparisons will make any sense. Welcome back. I'm Zacc. This video is packed. We have 7 different accounts, 4 key attributes, 9 pro tips that I'll be sprinkling throughout this entire video. So make sure you watch all the way till the end to get all 9 pro tips. 1 comprehensive free guide. It's basically an ebook that I've written to help cover all of this discussion and this topic. I'm also going to show you exactly what I did. I'm going to answer the question on whether or not I'm opening a Trump account for my kids. And I'm going to walk through what I would do if I had a newborn today, which would be crazy because I'm probably closer to becoming a grandparent than being made a father again. But that's a lot to cover in one video. Stay with me. So the first 2 concepts you need to understand before we get into the attributes of these accounts or the accounts themselves. Concept number 1 is called the kiddie tax. So the IRS doesn't really like the idea of parents hiding investment income in their child's tax bracket. A kid has the ability to experience a lower bracket by, their earned income or other income. But, people caught on to that and thought, okay, I'll put millions of dollars in my kids' names and therefore I won't have to pay as high of capital gains tax or investment income tax or things like that. The IRS caught on to that and they have a limit. There's only so much that you can log at and say this is the child's income. For earned income, like if the child has a job, it doesn't work like this. It's for investment or unearned income. The limit is $2,700. That's in 2026. And this number has been climbing every single year. So depending on when you watch this video, it might be higher. Likely will be higher. So $2,700 of investment income escapes at the child's own tax rate, which tends to be very, very low. Above that, they do something called the kiddie tax, and they take all the excess above $2,700 and they apply it to mom and dad's rate, so the parents' rate. And this matters enormously when comparing the different accounts like a custodial account that's owned by the minor to other account types that are more tax sheltered or owned by other people. So it's really important that you understand that kiddie tax. It's pretty simple. $2,700 in 2026 is taxed at the child's rate. Anything above that gets pushed to the parents, and the parents have to show it and pay taxes at their rate. And okay, so this leads us to pro tip number 1. Most people hear about the kiddie tax, and they assume the kiddie tax is a pure disadvantage. But in the right hands, it can be a huge opportunity. I'm going to explain exactly how in a couple of steps as we get into some new account types or other account types. I'm going to tell you a 2-step process that turns the kiddie tax into a strategy that is advantageous and not a penalty. Concept number 2, financial aid. So there are grants and loans available to kids especially as they move into college, and FAFSA is the governing body that oversees that process. So there's a FAFSA application, FAFSA is the acronym. And they assess assets differently depending on who owns them. If the child owns it, it's very different than if the parent owns it. And some accounts are actually excluded entirely. So parent-owned assets are assessed at 5.64%. So what they're saying here is the organization is saying, well, the parents have a decent amount of money. We're going to say that up to 5.64% of those assets are the family's contribution, or should be the family's contribution toward the higher education expenses for this minor. That's actually, depending on how much money you have, that can be a big number and it can feel excessive. And then child-owned assets are actually 20%. So if the kid has assets themselves in their own name, then 1/5 of that gets included every year as the child's contribution toward their higher education expenses. Even if you don't use that money for the actual education expense, in the application they're saying, but you should. And therefore, we're going to reduce the financial aid capability or eligibility by this amount. And then some accounts are excluded entirely, like retirement accounts. So an IRA is considered for retirement. So in the FAFSA assessment process, they're not saying, well, you should be pulling with penalties from your retirement accounts to fund college. And sometimes you can get an exception, but that's not the point. The point is they allow those to go without any inclusion in the process. So choosing the wrong account type can quietly reduce your child's financial aid eligibility. And this leads us to pro tip number 2. So be thoughtful about how the assets are owned. Is it by the minor, by the parent, or by the grandparents? The parental asset protection allowance can hide some assets, but for good savers, I mentioned if you have a lot of money, it won't hide everything. And the inclusion rates being 20% for minors, 5.64 for parents, and then 0 for grandparents. So I'll talk about that here in a second. That's a strategy, potentially to have grandparents own assets that are designed for the minors at higher education. Okay, so those are the first 2 concepts, kiddie tax and financial aid. Now, what is the measuring stick that we will use to determine whether or not each of these 7 accounts are good or bad? Well, it's not one measuring stick, it's 4. And that's why financial planning is so personal, because you might have strong feelings about these 4 that are different, or you might weight them differently than your neighbor or friend. So let's talk through these 4 different attributes, and then we'll go through each account and explain how they behave within each of those 4 environments. Number 1 is tax benefits. So this is the whole reason you're doing this. Obviously, you're trying to save money for your child for a specific purpose in the future. You could just do that in your own accounts. So why not? So why in the world should you even consider all these other account types? The reason for considering the other account types is potentially getting to use the child's lower tax rate. Maybe there's tax-free growth. Maybe there's a tax incentive of free deposit of money that we're going to talk about here in a second. So those are all tax benefits. Those are the reasons that you would consider using these account types. And if you can imagine a scale, you're going to put the tax benefits on one side of the scale. And the other 3 attributes are all limitations or impacting things to the assessment. And they sit on the other side of the scale. The other 3 are control and ownership, eligible expenses, and financial aid. Control and ownership is talking about who owns this thing, who controls it in terms of investment decisions, withdrawal capability, any decision making. And then specifically, and the thing that really makes most parents question and be concerned is what happens when the child turns 18 or 21, depending on your state's age of majority. For some people, the conversion of those assets to the child's control is a really big deal. So we're going to talk about how that plays out in each of these account types. So that's control and ownership. Eligible expenses. So in order to get the tax benefits, many times you are limited to specific expenditures or specific things that you can spend the money on. That's your list of or rules around eligible expenses. So what can the money actually be spent on? And then number 4 is financial aid impact. So having this asset, does it really create a huge loss in the potential to get grant money or loans for higher education? So once again, you're looking at this scale, and every account gets evaluated on these 4. And as we walk through this, we're going to do it in the same order I just went through every single time. So again, imagine you've got the scale of tax benefits, and then you have control and ownership, eligible expenses, and financial aid. Are the issues or limitations in those 3 categories so great that it outweighs the tax benefit? That tells you something. Maybe you should skip that account type. Or does the tax benefit, is it so strong and these other limitations are really not that big of a deal to you, that may push you or pull you, I guess, toward that account type and entice you to actually take advantage of the tax benefits. Okay, we're going to walk through this. Before we dive completely in, I'm providing a complete guide to all 7 accounts, these 4 attributes for free. I'll put a link in the description so that you can get that emailed to you. Once you add your email in that link, you'll be the first to get it when the guide goes live. If the guide is live by the time you watch this video, it'll be emailed to you immediately when you request it, and you'll use the link in the description to get it. Okay, account number 1, 529. And by the way, 529s and UTMAs, those are the two accounts that it seems like everybody talks about. 529 or custodial. We'll hit those two first. The reality is it's not 2, it's 7. So keep that in mind here. This is not your only option. And so the first question is, can I even open this today? Yes, anytime if you have a child, anytime from birth, that individual can have a 529 in their name. So why would you do it? Let's talk tax benefit. It's tax-free growth if you use it for qualified expenses. Basically, if you follow the rules of the eligible expense list, then any growth you experience on this portfolio could be completely tax-free. If you use it for non-qualified expenses, you may experience a 10% penalty, plus you'll experience the income tax on the earnings for non-qualified use. So that's the tax benefit, tax-free growth. That's one of the best tax benefits. Think of that similar to a Roth IRA where you put the money in and then it grows completely tax-free for when you take it out, but specifically for education expenses. Tax benefits. Control and ownership. So parents retain full control of a 529. They can change the beneficiary on the account, meaning you set it up for one of your kids and they ended up not needing that much for college or other expenses. You can change the beneficiary to your next kid on the account. There are some account types that are not eligible for that kind of change. It never legally transfers to the child. That's important. You could have a child that's 35, no longer a child, and it doesn't legally become theirs at the age of majority. So the control and ownership stays with the parent. As we talk about control and ownership being good or bad, that's very relative. So we're going to be thinking about it more of where that control lies. But most parents think it's good when the control doesn't automatically transfer to the minor because they don't know if the minor can handle it yet, especially when the kid is only a year or two old and they have no idea who that child will turn into. Okay, eligible expenses. This has the best tax benefit, right? Being completely tax-free growth. In order to get it, you need to spend it on education things. And it's a pretty broad list. So when you're talking about higher education like college, universities, that's going to be pretty broad. I'm not going to go into the full list today. That's what it's designed for. It can include things in addition to tuition, though. So just keep that in mind before you dive into it. Look at the list, ensure that it's an eligible expense, and then you'll be able to pull money from your 529 and spend it. You can spend up to $10,000 on K through 12 as well. That's a recent change. 529s are many years old, but in the last, I think it was about 5 years ago, they expanded the list to include K through 12. Up till then, it didn't. Financial aid. So this is a parent-owned asset assessed at the 5.64% rate. So it's one of the more favorable structures available. It's not 0, but it's also not 20% like some of the other accounts. So we're up to pro tip number 3. Keep in mind there's a really important little rule here. You cannot use the same expenses to claim both a tax-free 529 distribution and then also say on your tax return, hey, I had education expenses and I want to take advantage of the education tax credit like an American Opportunity or Lifetime Learning credits. So you can't get that tax credit and pull from the 529 for the same dollars. If you had $5,000 worth of tuition that you paid from the 529, you can't say that $5,000 is expense that should make you eligible for the American Opportunity or Lifetime Learning credits. Just make sure you don't accidentally double dip on those. You must choose one benefit per dollar of expense. Account number 2. This is custodial accounts, UTMAs or UGMAs. That acronym stands for Uniform Transfer to Minor Act or Uniform Gift to Minor Act. It's all the same thing. We don't need to get into the details as to what that means. What it is it's an account owned by the minor with a custodian to care for it. The custodian is most often the parent. It doesn't have to be. And can you open this today? Yes, anytime. As soon as the person is born, they have a social security number, you can open up a custodial account and make deposits to it. When you make a deposit or when you put money into a custodial account, that is an irrevocable gift to the minor. It is the minor's. So why would you do this? Again, we start with tax benefits. The benefit of doing so is that you could experience the child's tax rate on the growth. If you just start making small contributions and you've put $1,000 in there and you get 5% interest on it or something like that, that $50 is going to completely disappear from a tax standpoint. And as that account grows, I'm using a 5% interest rate, but like you should be investing more aggressively when you have a long time horizon. I'm not here to tell you exactly how to invest individually, but know that that's not like a specific rate associated with an account. You can invest however you want in this thing. But keep in mind that if you are somewhere around 5 to 10% growth rate, then the account could be $27,000 to $54,000 before you even run into the $2,700 kitty tax limit if you're very careful about what kind of dividends and interest and capital gains you experience. So the benefit, subject to the kid's tax rate, up to $2,700 of interest, and then anything above that isn't a benefit. It gets taxed at your own rate. It's no better than just investing in your own portfolio. If you do it right, which I'll explain here in a second, you can really take advantage of this and turn it more similar into what happens with a 529 account with broader flexibility on the eligible expenses. So who owns this thing? The money belongs to the child. And who controls it? The guardian or the custodian, in this case, actually makes the investment decisions and has the ability to withdraw or deposit and make all the changes. It is an irrevocable transfer. And then when the child reaches the age of majority, it legally is theirs. Now, some custodians are not forcing that change immediately, but the child has rights to convert that to an individual account in their name, most likely at the age of 18, 19, 20, 21, depending on your state. So eligible expenses. And before I move on that's a big deal to a lot of people. Some people stress about that idea if they build a lot of money in the custodial account and then all of a sudden an 18-year-old has full access without any visibility from the parent as to what they're doing with it. Is like, are you going to go out and buy a really expensive, unnecessary car, or are you going to be really careful and potentially spend that on education and a home purchase or something like that? That's a big deal, and that causes people to pause and think a bit. Okay, eligible expenses. This is where it's very wide open and nice. Anything that benefits the minor, and it's supposed to be for beyond normal life-sustaining expenses. So you can't withhold groceries from the child and use their custodial account to pay for the child for food. That's the responsibility, legal responsibility of a parent to make sure their child is fed. So that's not something that the child should be expected to pay out of their custodial account. But it's wide open beyond that. It's not just school. It could be camp. It could be cars. It could be weddings. It could be anything. Obviously, you hope your child doesn't get married that early, but some people think about these account types as a wedding fund or something like that. Okay, financial aid, child-owned asset. So it is assessed at 20%, and that's the least favorable structure. So here, I'm finally going to give you the 2 steps that I use to create tax-free growth. This is pro tip number 4. You can create tax-free growth in your custodial account through 2 steps. It's a tax gain harvesting strategy that most people miss. So step 1, each year, you deliberately manage the custodial account to show as little dividends and interest as possible. So you buy investments that have growth potential but don't necessarily distribute a lot of dividends. That is more of your growth stock type investments. And then that will keep the reportable income low each year. And then step 2, as you get to the end of the year, you purposefully look at what's already been reported, what's likely to be reported through dividends and interest for the rest of the year. And then you say, okay, maybe there's only $1,000 of dividends and interest because you've kept that pretty low. And now you have another $1,700 in 2026 because of that $2,700 limit. And you can purposefully, this is step 2, you purposefully sell some positions and realize capital gains to fill any headroom that exists between the dividends and interest that you have and the kitty tax line, whatever it is in that year. So in this year, $2,700. If you chip away at that every single year, what you're doing is you're selling that at a gain, repurchasing the investment, and you are raising what is considered after-tax money or your basis in the investment, and you're raising it every single year. And it's so much better to do it that way than to wait for 18 years, child turns 18, and sells an investment for a $30,000 capital gain, and then they have to pay taxes on all of that when you could have chipped away $2,700 every single year. And keep in mind that even if you had an investment that doubled and you're selling it, you basically are selling $5,400 worth of an investment and reporting a $2,700 capital gain. So you can actually sell quite a bit of portfolio and have it escape within this kiddie tax line. And that's why I think it's an advantage to be able to use the minor's rate. And if managed properly, it actually works really well. And this actually worked for my daughter. It's not quite eliminating all the taxes on the account because it grew faster than what I was able to chip away at under the kiddie tax limits, but it worked pretty darn well. Okay, account number 3. Parent or grandparent brokerage account. So the idea here is basically, what if I don't? What if I don't set up a kid's savings account? What if I just set up my own account and I know it's for my kids? And we see this often with grandparents because they're looking at the situation like, I don't know exactly what my grandkids are thinking. I don't know if I'm going to give it all to a certain ones that go do this or that, or if I'm going to give it evenly. And what's even anyway with inflation over the maybe 20-year period that your grandkids are reaching college. So there are so many variables that oftentimes grandparents will go with this option. So the question is, can I open it today? Obviously you can. It's just a regular investment brokerage account in your own name. So yeah, you probably already have one if you're watching these types of videos. So the tax benefits of this, there's no specific shelter for using this for college or education, but there are also no restrictions either. And if you manage an after-tax portfolio well, long-term capital gains are taxed at a lower rate than ordinary income. And oftentimes, if you get the right type of dividends in the portfolio, you can have what's called qualified dividends that experience long-term capital gains. If you do things like tax loss harvesting, you can delay capital gains or at least manage it across the gains and losses. So many options here that you can take advantage of. So don't think that because I'm saying there's no shelter or no specific benefit for college, don't think that the account has a crazy amount of tax drag. That's up to how well you manage the investments. Okay, the next step is control and ownership. So again, the tax benefit is not super high on this account type. Not as good as a 529, not as good as a custodial account. Letting some, at least with a custodial account, $2,700 escapes at the child's rate. A brokerage account in your own name is as if kiddie tax applied to the whole thing, right? Because it's already taxed at the parent or grandparent rate. So not as heavy or strong on the tax benefits. However, the other categories are really nice. So control and ownership, it's yours. It's your money. There's no legal transfer requirement. There's no majority age restrictions where you have to move it over. This is maximum control, maximum ownership. You could change your mind entirely. You've made no gift, so it's not an irrevocable gift to a minor. You could decide that you and your spouse or you yourself, you're taking this money and going on vacations. Like, it doesn't matter. It's complete control. Eligible expenses, again, completely unrestricted. No legal purpose requirement here. And then financial aid, it is assessed at the parent's rate because it's a parent asset. So it's the same as a 529 at the 5.64% inclusion rate. Now, here's the crazy part. This is pro tip a couple pro tips for you. Pro tip number 5, if you plan to give stock, so let's say you have invested in a portfolio like this, and it's time to start giving it to like maybe a 20-year-old. And you have stocks that you've had in the portfolio that have grown for a long time. Instead of selling the stocks and then giving cash to that 20-year-old, you could potentially give the stock through an in-kind transfer. Let's say that you're giving them $10,000 worth of cash for tuition, and you only paid $3,000 for that investment. You could give them the $10,000 in shares of the stock, make them sell it. That 20-year-old kid, probably has a much lower tax rate. And by the way, owned by them, if they're filing their own tax returns and they're not a dependent, so maybe a little older child, but not a dependent of somebody, they could potentially not even have kiddie tax apply to them at all. So the point I'm trying to make is, pro tip is, if you plan to gift you could plan to gift appreciated stock rather than cash, because giving shares directly may be more tax efficient than selling them at your higher rate especially, when your child's in a lower tax bracket. But tip number 6 has to do with financial aid. And this is where, how I mentioned in this account type, it's included at the 5.64% rate because it's a parent asset, but not for grandparents. So a grandparent asset is not reported on FAFSA at all. It's one step away, and they don't make you include that. They don't reach that far to look at grandma and grandpa. So the form only considers assets owned by the student at 20% or the student's parent at the 5.64% rate. So this means that grandparent-owned accounts set aside for grandchild carry 0 FAFSA penalty regardless of the balance. All right, let that sink in for a second. We have a lot of grandparent clients, so you can see why the grandparent-owned brokerage account appeals to them. All right, account number 4. This is the custodial Roth IRA. I almost didn't include this one. And the reason is because in order to make a contribution to a Roth IRA in a minor's name, the minor has to have earned income. And not that many kids are earning that much money. So that means your contribution limits per year are quite limited. If the kid has a legit job and earns $1,000 in a summer, that's the most you could put into a custodial Roth account. So there's no age requirement. Anybody can open one, but there's an earned income requirement that becomes quite limiting because of how little most kids earn. Tax benefits. This is basically the cleanest tax profile of any account here. The after-tax contributions go in. It's just a Roth IRA. All the growth is completely tax-free. There's no kiddie tax because there's no annual investment income reported on the portfolio. It's just growing with tax-free growth. And there's no conversion step that you have to do, like not a Roth conversion or anything like that. It already is a Roth account. So it just has a custodian hooked onto it because the minor can't legally be making those kinds of trades and decisions at 5 years old. So you put a custodian on it until they reach the age of majority. So that leads itself to control and ownership. I do want to be clear that that's one of the very best tax structures, right? We talked about 529s being completely tax-free growth for education. Custodial Roth is completely tax-free for retirement planning and retirement savings. That's a long ways away, by the way, to be thinking about a minor for retirement. So that's something that doesn't happen as often. So tax benefit is strong here. Control and ownership on the other side of the scale. The child owns it from day one. It's an irrevocable transfer automatically at the age of majority. So it's the same loss of control from the parent as you experience in a custodial UTMA or UGMA account. And that causes some heartburn for some people. They worry about the child burning through it if they have complete access and not any oversight after that. Eligible expenses. So contributions, this is the same as a Roth IRA. So let's just review those rules. Contributions can be withdrawn at any time for any reason. That's important. A lot of people don't realize that because they think Roth IRA, retirement, not for the contributions. You can pull your contributions out anytime for anything. But the earnings follow standard Roth rules, and that the earnings will be taxed and have penalties if you don't follow the rules just right. And in particular, there are 2 5-year rules for Roth IRAs, and there's a 5-year conversion rule and then what's called a 5-year forever rule. I have a complete video on that and went through 7 different scenarios on how to understand that. That's not as simple as it should be. But as long as you follow the 5-year forever rule and you are over 59 and a half, then all the growth will also be tax-free and not penalized. So if you wanted to, you could technically spend some of this money on education expenses, but it would need to be the contributions. Anything beyond that can be taxed and penalized. Financial aid. Because this is a retirement account, the FAFSA application does not require you to include any of it. So you don't have to say, hey, I have a Roth IRA of $20,000, so therefore a certain percentage of that needs to be included. No, it's a retirement account. However, if you take distributions, those do count as income on the next year's FAFSA application. So if you chose to take those contributions out and cover education expenses, you would have to include that as income. So it's not just assets that get included in the account application. It's also income from both parents and minors. Moving on to account number 5. Okay, this is where it starts to bring in specific providers as well. Fidelity in particular has an account called the Fidelity Youth Account. This is very similar to a custodial account, but it's got a little bit of a twist. So a custodial account can be opened at any time. So the question is, can I open this Fidelity Youth account as well? Not until the child turns 13. This is literally a teenager's account. And that's why they call it the Fidelity Youth account. So why do you do it? The tax benefits. It has the same benefit of having some of the income escape out at the child's rate. It is subject to kiddie tax as well. And so the capital gain harvesting strategy applies here as well. So the control and ownership on this one is really unique. The teen has full independent access, and the parent gets oversight, but the teen controls it. So let's contrast this with the custodial account. The custodial account, the minor doesn't really have any access, doesn't have any oversight, doesn't make any of the trades, make any of the decisions. The minor may not even know the thing exists. The custodian is 100% in control, even though the minor is 100% in ownership. This flips that. The minor is 100% ownership still, but the control is the part that flips. The flip of control is from the custodian. There's no longer a custodian. It literally is controlled by the minor. And the parent has oversight. They get like an inquiry access. They get the ability to see what's going on and oversee what's going on, but they are not the custodian. It's not a custodian account. So this is different. We're putting much more control in the hands of the minor in this case. So what can you spend this account on? It is completely unrestricted. Teen spends it however they choose. It's the teen's account. So that could be looked at as a really positive thing because it's very flexible, and it could be looked at as a very negative thing because it's very flexible. And depending on the child, that's gonna tell you whether that's a positive or negative. You'll know your kid best. Financial aid. This is owned by the child. It's likely to be assessed at the 20% rate as well. I say likely because Fidelity and the next provider I'm going to talk to you about, they haven't given as much guidance. Fidelity's is a little bit more clear than the next one, and so it's 20% assessed at the child-owned rate of 20%. So that takes us to account number 6, which is another provider. It's Schwab. So Schwab has a teen investor account as well. Fidelity Youth account, Schwab teen account. They're both eligible at the age of 13. So if you can't open it from 0 to 12, they must be a teenager, and at that time you can open up a Schwab teen investor account as well. So once again, tax benefits. Why do you do this? You would do this one as well because it has the same benefits, same rules, same kiddie tax exposure to custodial accounts and the Fidelity Youth account. So I'm not going to repeat that again. The control and ownership on this is different than the Fidelity account even. It's not the same. This is a true joint account. The parent and the teen both have separate logins. They both are owners on this account. That's different. On the Fidelity account, the minor is the 100% owner with an oversight inquiry access. On a custodial account, the minor is a 100% owner with a custodian in control. This is not that. This is a true joint account between parent and child, meaning they both own the assets equally, which means they can both spend and use the assets equally. Whereas if a parent tried to get into the Fidelity Youth account or the custodial account to spend it on things the parent wanted, that would be a problem. But this account is equally owned by parent and child. So the eligible expenses, completely unrestricted. Leave it right there. Financial aid. Now, the way this account is designed and the way all brokerage accounts seem to be designed that I've run into, when you have a joint account, you have to provide one tax ID number or social security number for the portfolio. Like a husband and wife can't say, okay, it's going to be both of our social security numbers for the tax reporting. Usually you pick one and the other is still an equal owner, but all of the income, all of the taxes are reported on one of the individuals. And it doesn't have to be husband and wife, could be partners, could be non-married relationships, could be partner relationships, just friends. I mean, you can set up joint accounts in many different structures. So if in this case, the way that Schwab sets it up is the minor is the primary tax identification number, which means that this is where we believe, and this account came out this year, March of 2026, so it's brand new. And Fidelity's came out in 2021. So we have a little bit more precedence around Fidelity's account. The Schwab teen investor account is new, my gut tells me that because it's reported to the child in the child's name and their social security number for the investment income and growth, that tells me that I'm expecting that it will be reported as investment income in their name, therefore gets up to $2,700 at their rate, subject to kiddie tax, and in addition to that, most likely subject to 20% inclusion for the FAFSA financial aid process. So that one's, I'm just trying to be clear, that one is still not decided or not clear. Schwab hasn't provided guidance on it, and it's so new that we haven't seen it. Okay, account number 7, which might be the reason you were here in the first place, which is why we did an entirely separate video on the Trump account. But account number 7 is the Trump account. And that's the reason we're releasing this video as well, because the One Big Beautiful Bill announced this back in July of 2025, and then accounts are launched and available on July 4th of 2026. So by the time you watch this, most likely that date's in the past, and you can open a Trump account anytime after that date. It can be opened for anyone younger than 18, and I'm specifically calling out that. I'm going to give you the exact timeframes here in a second because it's not as simple as their birthday. But before we get into that, let's go through our 4 attributes. The tax benefits. Well, first of all, there's a potential for $1,000 of free seed money for children born in 2025 through 2028. You must file Form 4547. That could have been done on your tax return, or you can do it on the Trump account website, which we can put a link to that in the description as well. So those are the 2 main processes, and it's a multi-step process. The other video goes through every single step. You'll have to verify your identity and a few things like that. They send you an email or information on that once you've said, I want to set this up and sign up. So the tax benefits, other than the $1,000 of free money for those who are eligible based on the years of birth, in addition to that, this is tax-deferred growth. It's not tax-free growth like a Roth. It's tax-deferred. Tax-deferred means we don't have to worry about kiddie taxes. We don't have to worry about dividends and interest every year. It's tax-deferred till the time at which you withdraw from the account, and then the growth that you withdraw from the account will be taxed as ordinary income. It might even be penalized. So here's one thing you really need to understand about this account. It is a traditional IRA. It was built on the chassis and the tax law of traditional IRA. Prior to the age of 18, they call that the growth phase of the Trump account. It's basically a traditional IRA with a bolt-on restriction and a bolt-on custodian. So I'll talk about the restrictions and custodian as we go through control and ownership and eligible expenses. But it's important that you think of this account as a traditional IRA, which means it's typically designed for long-term retirement savings. So control and ownership, I mentioned it's a traditional IRA with a bolt-on custodian. So it's fully locked until the child turns 18. The investments are restricted to U.S. stock index funds that are offered through the government's program. And so that means you're not going to see a lot of like parent or kid stock picking like they could in the Fidelity, Schwab, or Custodial accounts. This account will have fewer investment options, but index funds tend to be very low cost. So I'm still waiting to see it a little bit, but that most likely they're going to be fairly efficient investments and diversified. So that's a good thing. In terms of the control and ownership, the custodian or the parent or grandparent, there's a priority order of who can set up these accounts for a minor. I'm just going to say parent in this case to keep that clean. But the parent has the control over contributions and the investment allocation if there are decisions to be made there. And then it is legally owned by the child. Before 18, and let's get into eligible expenses. There are no withdrawals that you can take before 18, like none. It's not even you can take it at a penalty. It's no withdrawals. Like you can't do it. So whatever money you put into this, you need to be really sure you don't need it back out for the next 18 years or however long from your kid's current age until 18. It behaves like a traditional IRA. It does have, after 18, then it drops that restriction. So that's the bolt-on restriction of no withdrawals at all. Because a traditional IRA, you can withdraw from it. You just might be penalized and taxed in a bad way. That's how it's treated. So here's the exact timing. You cannot make contributions to the account as of January 1, in the year in which the child turns 18. My daughter turns 18 in July of 2026. So we're only a few weeks out from her birthday. And because of that, I cannot make a contribution to her to a Trump account in her name, even though the accounts will go live on July 4th and she will be still 17. I cannot do it because it's the calendar year in which she turns 18 that she's no longer eligible for contributions. Then withdrawals begin on January 1 of the calendar year after she's 18, if we wanted to, but it's not meant for that. I mean, you could get an education or first home expense exception, and that's just the normal situation with a normal traditional IRA, that there are a few exceptions to the 10% penalty. But you will be taxed as ordinary income on that growth as it comes out. And then the account itself has different sources. So you have your own contributions. They're not a deduction for you. So they're after-tax money that you're dropping into this account. If you get the government seed money, that's pre-tax money. If you get growth on the portfolio, which you should, that's pre-tax money. And then there actually is an opportunity for employers to contribute to these accounts up to $2,500 per year. The total max contributions are $5,000 a year. The $2,500 from the employer count towards that number. The employer can make those contributions, and they can take a deduction if they do it right. And it's per employee, not per employee's kids. So I have 3 children. If my employer was doing a program where they made contributions to a Trump account for me as an employee, it would not be $2,500 to each of my children. It would be $2,500 across all my children. So if they do it right, if they stay within those limits, if they follow it correctly, they can. And there are, by the way, there are rules against it going to the employee's own Trump account and getting it to be a pre-tax or pre-payroll tax. If you're not following this, that's okay. I talk about it more in the Trump account video. The bottom line is it's pre-tax money. So you have contributions that you as a parent made that are after tax, growth that's pre-tax. You have the government seed money of $1,000 that's pre-tax, and employer contributions that are pre-tax. 4 different types of money, one of which you've paid taxes on, 3 of which you have not. So when you withdraw, you have to know what those sources are and the exact percentages of those sources as a comparison to the total balance is the exact percentage that gets applied to every single withdrawal. And that percentage will change with the growth and change, up and down on the portfolio, or a withdrawal takes a little bit from each. And so you'll have to track that. Okay, that's a lot. So let's keep going. But the point is, eligible expenses. This thing was designed for retirement, and it only has a few exceptions, the normal traditional IRA exceptions for education and first home purchase. From a tax standpoint, and it's a handful of things, but those are the 2 that we hear about the most. From a tax standpoint, when we look at the scale, the tax benefits of this thing are not that great. If you are not getting the $1,000. If you're getting the $1,000 for free, it's actually a great deal. That's a big deal. But if you're not eligible, if your kid was born before 2025 or after 2028, and you're not getting that $1,000 worth of free money, you are setting up a retirement account like a traditional IRA that doesn't give you a deduction for putting money in. The tax benefits are really not that great, but yet I'm still going to tell you why there's a really cool strategy you could take advantage of. From a financial aid standpoint, this one guidance is still not yet confirmed, but my gut tells me it will be treated more like a custodial Roth IRA or regular traditional IRA in the student's name, which means it would be considered a retirement account and excluded from the FAFSA inclusion requirements. That's my gut. Okay, we're on to pro tip number 7 as I've been sprinkling these in. If you've been making contributions to a Trump account at age 18, when the Trump account rules transition to be treated just like a regular traditional IRA, the owner, the child who just became 18 in that year, may be able to convert it to a Roth. Think about this. You've got contributions that are post-tax and then growth that is pre-tax. So when you do the conversion of that account, you'll only have to pay taxes on the pre-tax portion, not on the post-tax portion that you already paid taxes on. This will set that owner up for future growth, all the future growth, to be tax-free. And often then an 18, 19, 20-year-old has pretty low income, and pretty low tax paying for showing an IRA to Roth conversion. And again, I've mentioned this already, but by the way, I mean, I have a video where I go into depth on all of these details of the new Trump account, what it is, who qualifies, restrictions, and more. So you can check that out on the channel. I'll have a link to it in the description so you can find it really easily, but you should also be able to find it on the main channel page. It's a video specifically around the Trump account. Okay, so we did it. We went through it, but there's so much more here. I'm going to tell you exactly what I did. But just stay with me because I want to recap. 7 accounts, 4 different attributes, the 4 measuring sticks, and then you'll need to think through each of those things and what matters most to you. And now I'm about to tell you exactly what I did and what I would do with the new accounts that are available. But a quick note to make sure you understand before I get into all this. This is what I did and what I would do. It's not advice for everyone. And what I did isn't what everyone should do. In fact, in the office, we have other financial advisors who have picked other things because their family dynamics and values and what they consider to be important is different. Your goals, your tax picture, your family dynamics may be completely different than this. So here's what I actually did. I have a set of twins that are currently 15 and a daughter who's 17. They will turn 16, 16, and 18 in 2026. What I did early on when they were just infants, I opened custodial accounts early. And by the way, when my wife and I had this discussion, I wanted 529 accounts because to me, the tax benefit was really important. She wanted custodial accounts because the flexibility to spend it on whatever was really important. So you all know how that went. We got custodial accounts out of that deal. So I was smart enough to know that's the route to go. So we set up these custodial accounts and I built a habit of putting a little bit of money into it every single month and tried to increase that over the years after I was hitting my retirement savings goals. So that's more important than funding kids' accounts. Let's just keep that in mind. Okay, so then I managed those accounts with that kitty tax strategy. I've been doing that every year. At the end of the year, I make sure that I log any capital gains, dividends, and interest up to the line. Every year, that line increases a little bit, currently $2,700. When they became teenagers, if they had any earned income, I opened up custodial Roth IRAs and I made a matching deal with them where if they contributed any money to the Roth IRA, I would also put money towards that. All of those contributions had to be less than their earned income or up to the amount that we reported as their earned income. Those accounts haven't grown nearly as much as the others because they were limited to how much money my kids were able to earn, having different jobs. My daughter worked at the gym and have worked in different places, and it's hard. It's hard to show that. And my son has done a lot of more manual labor work that is just going door to door and getting a few bucks to clean out garbage cans and things like that. So that's a lot harder to those you report manually, but it's just not enough to really make much of a dent in the custodial Roth contributions. Okay, so that was my deal for them. And then I gave them some skin in the game and made education, like money education, more real and not hypothetical. And then the custodial accounts are still there. They're still growing. They're still managed as a really flexible bucket. And then I also opened up bank accounts in their names with debit cards that I have access to see exactly. In fact, I get a notification every time they spend money on their debit cards. I know exactly where they are based on that. So those are the 3 main account types that my kids had. Custodial accounts that they don't know the balances, they don't know what's going on in those. Those are my wife and my savings accounts for them. And then a bank account that they're in charge of making sure that thing doesn't get too low and that they manage their debit card really well. And a custodial Roth IRA that they can contribute to and I match. And it's not dollar for dollar. It's like 10 to 1. If they'll put any dollars in, I'll match a lot more into it because I want them to have a lot of incentive to get used to it and start making contributions. Hopefully it doesn't ruin them when they get to the real employment world and the match is not nearly as generous there. But let's move on to what I would do today. So that's what I did. However, when I started, about half of these options didn't exist. So what would I do today with all 7 of these options on the table? I would open a Trump account immediately. I'd file that 4547. I'd get that $1,000 worth of seed money. It's free money. Take it. I would treat it as a retirement foundation, not a college fund. And I would leave it alone to compound for 60 years. There is some magic there. I go into the Trump account video. I explain 5 different ways you could seed your kid with $1 million at age 60 with not that big of contributions into a Trump account. So I would do that. I would fund custodial accounts like I did regularly, and I would use that as the primary near-term flexibility bucket. I would have that available for things that are outside of college and things that I'm hoping that they'll like learn to spend money responsibly as they get older. At 13, I would open a Fidelity Youth account or the Schwab Teen account, depending on how independently the kids want to manage it. So if it's completely independent, I'll do the Fidelity Youth account. If they want me on it as well, I would do the Schwab Teen account as a joint account. So why would you do this? Well, I want, like my son actually has strong opinions about investing and growth and buying stocks. I want him to start, and he puts his own money into it. I want him to have that that incentive and that excitement and that experience. And so there's a big difference in my mind between custodial account and the Fidelity Youth account or Schwab Teen account. Fidelity Youth or Schwab Teen account, that's their money. Custodial account, that's the money I put in for them, and I want it managed differently. One is to teach them, the other is to build wealth and opportunity. So the Fidelity Youth and Schwab Teen accounts, I would use it as an education tool. I'd leave the custodial account as is. I would start the money conversations early through the teen account. I would use that account to let them make small, real decisions with real consequences. It's been interesting to hear my son talk about losing money on down market days and having to walk through that with him. In the final years before they turn 18, I would front load the after-tax contributions to the Trump account. I'd put the $5,000 in as much as I can. They turn 18, Roth conversion, and then we would just leave that Trump account alone. And that thing hopefully grows to $1 million by the time they hit 60, completely tax-free as the beginning seed of their retirement account. Why didn't I do a Trump account? Well, it didn't exist. So the custodial Roth IRA was the closest thing I had available to it. It required earned income. And my kids had to actually work before I could put money into their name, and that was difficult. So the benefit of the Trump account is it does not require earned income. So what do I need to do now? Given that that was what I would do if they were born today, that means there are a few things I still can do with my teens. They're not eligible for the seed money, but I can still open those Trump accounts even without the $1,000 of seed money. And I can still open the Fidelity or Schwab Teen account and get them investing and trading. My son's already doing a bit of it. And we can keep executing the custodial Roth match account. And then when they hit 18, convert to a Roth IRA. So here's the point. We brought this all together. I know this was long, and if you've made it this far, great work. You do not have to choose one account. I didn't. Most of what I did involved 2 or 3 account types working together for different goals. And now you got to think through, like, how do I actually make this decision? Well, what are you saving for? Is it college? Is it retirement? Is it just flexibility in general? The next question is, how much control do you want to keep? How much are you willing to let that child have? What is your child's current age? Are they a teenager? Are they newborn? Do they have earned income? Does financial aid matter for your situation? Or will you have saved so much money or have such high income, you're going to break all the financial aid application rules anyway, so the financial aid consideration isn't important. And the right account isn't necessarily the newest one. It's the one that fits your goals. So pro tip number 8 and number 9. Here's number 8. Use more than one child savings account type. It's not an all or nothing decision. Who says you can't benefit from multiple account types or multiple tax structures? And pro tip number 9, let your decision be driven by your care for your loved ones. Let taxes and the financial math take a back seat. Let them come secondary. That's important, but your care for your loved one is primary. You'll never regret losing a few tax dollars if you save a relationship or you empower and teach a loved one. So what's the takeaway? The best account isn't the newest account. It isn't necessarily the one with the biggest tax break. And it isn't the one your neighbor happens to like the most. The best account is simply the one that matches what you're actually trying to accomplish. If you're saving for education, your answer may look very different than someone saving for retirement. If flexibility matters most, you'll probably make a different decision than someone trying to maximize tax benefits. And if financial aid is a part of the equation, ownership may matter just as much as the investment performance of the portfolio. That's why I don't think it's an either-or decision. And as for me, if I had a newborn baby, I would absolutely be opening a Trump account. I'd be getting that $1,000 seed money, but I wouldn't stop there. I'd still use the other accounts for flexibility, education, teaching my kids about money, because no single account does everything. Don't choose an account because it's new. Choose it because it solves the problem you're trying to solve. And I know this was a lot, that's exactly why I put together a free written guide that goes much deeper than we could even in an hour-long video. It includes comparison tables, reference charts, summaries of every account, the same decision-making framework we use today, so you can come back to it when you need it. If you'd like a copy, you'll find it in the link in the description below. It's completely free. And remember, this content is educational in nature. It's not specific advice. I mentioned that before. If you would like us to actually give you advice on this, give us a call, and we'll talk through the details and what is important to you and how to make this decision for you. And all right, if you've made it this far, I want you to put something in here in the comments. Tell me what do you think is the worst of these accounts? Of the 7 accounts, tell me which one is the least useful. No hate, just tell me which one is the least useful. I'll be really interested to see what pops up. And if you found this video helpful, send it to someone. Every week I make a video like this to help individuals and families make smarter financial decisions by breaking down complicated topics into something that's actually understandable. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe to get good with money, and I'll see you next time.